Evander Alistair, the archmage whose name had once inspired awe, was dying in his bed, not on the battlefield. It wasn't an enemy's sword that had caused it, but a silent, inexorable curse, the legacy of his own youthful quest for the elixir of immortality. Now in his early 50s, he understood the full extent of his mistake. The eternity he so craved would be eternal torture. The true beauty of life lay in its fragility, at its very end. His students crowded around his bed. The youngest and brightest was Leanne, a girl with a will forged in the desert sands whom he had saved many years ago. Her eyes were brimming with tears. Evander, smiling, stroked her hair and mentally, through a mental connection, addressed them all. He apologized for not being able to accompany them in the coming war against the demons, but he believed in their strength. He entrusted Leanne with his research into the history of the void hidden within the Forbidden Tower. To his eldest student, the gray-haired Pollux, he entrusted the care of the others. Then his body, starting from the limbs, began to turn to dust. At his last moment, looking at his sobbing disciples, he thought he had lived a good life. Darkness fell. Consciousness returned to him, not in the expected nothingness, but in a sharp, painful reality. He tasted blood in his mouth, felt pain in his ribs, and felt the cold stone floor beneath his back. His arms and legs were twisted, his eyes were blindfolded, and his mouth was gagged with a dirty rag. The voices around him were rough, full of malice and fear. Evander analyzed the situation in a flash. He was alive, but in a foreign, battered body. His magical power, once ocean-like, was now a pitiful puddle in this new vessel. But even a puddle was enough. When the bandits, having detected his pulse, panically untied his legs, Evander concentrated. A weak trickle of mana rustled through his channels. The ropes on his hands flared and crumbled. He tore off the blindfold and gag. In the dim torchlight, 5 battered men appeared before him. "Who are you? What's going on?" he asked, his voice young and unfamiliar, hoarse. Instead of answering, one of them spat in his face. That was a mistake. Evander snapped his fingers. Spheres of light flared from the ceiling and the torches died down. The sudden darkness was filled with short wheezing sounds and dull thuds. A second later, he held the one they called Boss by the throat. Memory-reading magic, albeit weakened, had penetrated his consciousness. A flood of fragmented images and emotions rushed through Evander's mind. He saw a pampered, cruel youth with silver hair, Lark Marcus, the second son of a powerful house. He saw his wicked pleasures, his arrogant disdain for everyone, his sexual harassment. He saw how this youth was kidnapped for ransom, how his weak heart gave way under the beating, and how a new consciousness entered the empty shell, his consciousness. He found himself in the kingdom of Lucas on the other side of the world, or in another world, in the body of a 14-year-old scoundrel. When the men in azure cloaks with the rose and shield emblem burst into the basement, they found a strange sight. 5 bandits were lying unconscious, and their captive, the young Master Lark, was sitting on a box looking at his palms with a thoughtful, not youthful expression on his face. The old butler, Gaston, with his monocle and slicked-back gray hair, barely held back tears of relief. "Young master, thank heavens!" Evander, now Lark, feigned shock. He allowed himself to be led to the carriage, feigning weakness, but his keen archmage gaze was already assessing the world around him. Outside the window, the squalid, snow-covered shacks of Blackstone flashed by, and the skeletal figures of its inhabitants trudged through the snowdrifts. And on the ground, pushing through the snow, grew nondescript weeds with small leaves. "Poison cloud," his lips whispered silently. In his world, the plant had a different name, but he knew its properties. It was edible when properly processed. Returning to the mansion, spacious but uncomfortable, Lark immediately sprang into action. He ordered Gaston to gather the servants and gather 2 cartloads of poison cloud. The butler, accustomed to his master's whims, was horrified. "Young master, they're poisonous. They'll kill people." "Follow the order." Lark's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it that Gaston had never heard before. A fire was lit in the courtyard of the mansion. Before the astonished eyes of his servants, Lark burned a bunch of weeds to ashes, collected the ashes, boiled them in a cauldron, and obtained a pale brown swollen mass. He scooped up a spoonful and ate. "The common people's wheat," he announced, "not tasty but nutritious. Now feed the city." Thus began the food distribution in Blackstone. At first, people approached cautiously, not believing the hated young master was capable of mercy, but hunger was stronger than fear. Lovar, a sullen hunter, watched with disdain as his younger brother, Anthony, joyfully ran with a bowl. Only after seeing people eating and not dying, and Lark himself promising with cold confidence to continue the distribution, did Lovar allow the icy wall of his hatred to show its first crack. Lark wasted no time. He studied the city archives. The picture was bleak: poverty, unemployment, a depleted treasury, barren lands. A black famine caused by pests had destroyed the previous harvest. Systemic solutions were needed. The first problem was winter itself, paralyzing all activity. Lark ordered 100 stone slabs to be crafted. On each one, he personally carved a complex magical glyph, and then, to Gaston's mute horror, generously sprinkled it with precious gold dust, a catalyst for long-lasting spells. A touch of his hand, an injection of mana, and the glyphs flared and vanished, woven into the stone structure. The heat stones were ready. They were buried at strategic points around the city. Around each one, the snow began to melt, and the air grew noticeably warmer. Working outside became possible. Then, Lark announced a massive recruitment drive. He needed farmers for the future regeneration of the land, builders for the city's expansion, and, most surprisingly, soldiers for his personal guard. Several dozen ragged, despairing people filed into the mansion's hall. Among them, Lark noticed a girl with frightened eyes, Melody. When asked if anyone could read, only she raised her hand. She had received her education while serving in the household of a noblewoman in the City of the Lion. But the most important was the selection of soldiers. Lark gave 15 of the strongest a clay pot and 3 seeds. "Your task is to germinate them in 4 days. 3 sprouts, you've passed. Less, you're out." Karat, a black-haired youth desperate to join the guard for the generous salary and the promised meat, tried his best, but only 1 seed sprouted. In desperation, he even considered cheating by slipping him a wild sprout, but his conscience wouldn't allow it. With a heavy heart, he took his single sprout for inspection. Many candidates stood proudly in the hall holding pots with 3 green shoots. Lark, sitting at a table with parchment, merely glanced at them. Failure. Next. "But, young master, I raised all 3, the first was indignant. "One of those seeds was dead," Lark replied coldly. "Then you cheated. I don't need liars in my guard." Silence fell over the room. Karat, approaching with his pot, was trembling. "Karat," Lark said, glancing at the entry, "1 plant. Honestly, congratulations, you're accepted." A wave of grateful gratitude surged through the boy's chest. Out of the 15, only 9 made it. Lark explained, "Strength can be trained, endurance can be developed, but character is given. A soldier is the master's support. If the core is rotten, everything else will rot too." Training began the very next day. Lark forcibly added 8 of the mansion's guards to the new recruits, led by Clarkson, a cynical professional who despised the former Lark with all his heart. To break their skepticism, Lark picked up a training spear. What followed was not an exercise but a deadly dance. The spear in his hands became a slashing snake, changing direction at the last moment, leaving behind a whistle and vague afterimages. An oppressive silence fell in the room. Clarkson, a seasoned warrior, felt a chill of fear run down his spine. There was not a hint of showmanship in these movements, only the honed, ruthless efficiency of a killer. "That's what you should be aiming for in a year," Lark said, barely out of breath. "For now, 300 laps around the hall with a spear. Whoever completes it gets a dried fish. The first gets an egg." He smiled, seeing the excitement ignite in the eyes of the poverty-weary men. Even Clarkson, grating his teeth, took hold of the shaft. Later, Lark found Melody. "I want you to teach the soldiers to read and write, and teach Gaston arithmetic yourself. Your salary is 15 pieces of silver, food, and shelter." The girl, who had expected the worst, agreed with relief. That night, when the city had fallen asleep, Lark, wearing a dark cloak, slipped out of the mansion. His destination? The eastern part of the endless forest, where documents said several hunters had mysteriously perished. His senses, enhanced by magic, led him to a cave, skillfully concealed by vines. Inside, the stench of rot filled the air, and muttering could be heard. Goblins, an entire lair, but the Archmage's gaze immediately caught something else. A faint shimmer in the stone walls. Cowrains, precious stones, an excellent export commodity. A smile touched his lips. The cave would become both a testing ground for his soldiers and a source of wealth for the city. Upon his return, Lark busied himself with city affairs. He compiled a long shopping list: seeds, iron ingots, tools, eggs. Gaston, seeing the young gentleman about to spend the last gold from the treasury on seemingly useless things, nearly clutched his heart, but was forced to comply.